Poppy Playtime is here with what might be their best chapter yet, and surprisingly, not their last chapter. But honestly, with all the twists and turns and lore reveals we've gotten, I'm just excited to see where the series goes next. So today we're going to go over exactly what happened in Chapter 5, what lore reveals we got, and where the series might be going in Chapters 6, 7, and beyond. So Slices, put on your aprons and let's bake ourselves a theory. So what actually happened in Chapter 5? It's honestly hard to talk about without going into all of the lore that got revealed, because they're honestly very intertwined. The game respects the player and assumes that if you want to know what's going on, you'll look into the lore yourself. It doesn't really ever hold your hand with that. Because if you don't look at any of the lore or any of the secret notes or anything while you play, honestly some of the stuff seems out of left field. But if you are paying attention to the lore as you find it, not necessarily the really hidden stuff, but the stuff that you can find looking around, not only is most of this game foreshadowed, it's directly explained before it happens. Down to the fact that this poster, which is all over this facility, foreshadows one of the biggest plot twists and reveals of the entire franchise. So let's go over the plot and figure out what happened. We start off right at the end of Chapter 4, where Huggy Wuggy is chasing us deeper into the laboratory, basically the home base for the prototype. We eventually get away and end up in recycling, the area where the smiling friends who did not take well to the brainwashing were thrown in, skinned alive, and their organs and fluids harvested for more experiments. It's a grim chapter, but it's there we meet Giblet, a surprisingly sentient and friendly toy. He explains that if we can find a new grab pack, he might be able to help us defeat the prototype. So we do just that and meet up again with him and his friend Chum, and discuss that while the prototype seems invincible, he was captured and tested on by the scientists for decades at Playtime Co. So surely if they figured out anything that could be used against him, they would have written it down. We just need to find the documentation. And after a little digging, we find out that there is a master copy of all of the information of Playtime Co. stored even further down in the data center. So that's the goal. We get there, we find out the weakness to the prototype, and we kill him. In getting this document, we also find out a few things. The poppy seeds had been utilized in order to create what they call the growth medium, something that can make flesh or living organic material exponentially grow. They do this on plants, they do this on people, they put it into the toys. It's the secret sauce that makes this work. And that growth medium, the perfected version, is the one that the prototype and Poppy are both full of, which is why they seem to not be able to die. They take a lot of damage, they don't eat or drink, yet they're still kicking and seem fine. It's that growth medium, the perfected version. We also find out about something called a negation formula. In essence, a chemical that could neutralize the effects of the growth medium. It's the thing we need to kill the prototype, and that recipe is on those data centers. So we continue further down, and on the way find out that the children are being brainwashed to be more acclimated to becoming a toy. All of these videos being recorded or performed live by Miss Gracie, this children's show nightmare flip of a thing. And it's not the presentation, it's the content.
Any negative Nancy's tell us we can't be toys, then we'll pop their heads off. Let's be soft like Huggy Wuggy, my little sweetie Sam.
And actually, it turns out that during the Hour of Joy, when they got their hands on her, they actually turned her into a toy and then forced her to watch her own videos, which is why Lily Lovebraids is so insane. But speaking of Lily, she captures us and offers us up to the prototype, where we finally get the reveal of this monstrosity, and let me tell you, this is an amazing design. I am so happy and impressed with the design of the prototype. Absolutely lived up to it. And I'm very glad I stayed off of Twitter and TikTok Tuesday and Wednesday until I played the game myself, because apparently it literally got spoiled the day before the game came out. Crazy. But it's revealed, as many of us suspected, that the orphans are in fact dead. And in front of us, the prototype seems to almost kill Poppy, possibly kill Poppy, but then there's a scuffle and Kissy scoops up Poppy and the three of us escape, finding out that Poppy did survive this seemingly fatal attack, likely due to her growth medium. We regroup and agree the plan is still to get to the tram to get to the data center. And we finally do, but as we get to the station, the prototype shows up again and kills Huggy Wuggy and Kissy Missy in front of us, leaving us only Giblet, Poppy, and ourselves, to which we hop on the train and eventually use the train to try to attack the prototype, and it does stall him for a moment, but again, he can't be killed normally. So he bursts out and catches up to us, stabbing the player through the chest kidnapping Poppy once again. And then there's this final cutscene, which, you know, we're looking at it, so many people think we're being dunked into the vat of the Poppy mixture, but I think that's what's happening to Poppy. He said that he will fix her and make her better, saying that she acts like a child because they made her into a child. So the idea that he breaks her and then throws her in the growth serum to grow more makes sense. Not to mention, we get stabbed and fall, and then we wake up to Giblet shocking us in the exact same spot. So I think we just got stabbed and left for dead. How we survived this stab, I have no idea. And frankly, it makes me think the player might already have some of the growth mixture inside of them, and we're going full Ethan Winters, but I don't know, that remains to be seen. But since we are finally at the servers, the player and Giblet go down and access the master backup copy of all the data. And the master copy is apparently the Doctor, who's still alive. And with the implications that we need to ask him for help, the chapter ends. What an insane chapter, and as wordy and long as that summary was, I promise you that is a bare bones skim of what we find out and what happens in chapter 4. Because this chapter seems to be our final rising action, giving us all the information we need to know about our antagonists, how to defeat them, how we're going to find out how we defeat them, who they are, what their motivations are. We got all of that in just chapter 5. So what lore did we learn in this chapter? Frankly, there was so much direct lore that some of it felt almost fan-made. It was too good to be true. And I'll be very honest in saying that as of recording and writing this, I have not found every single note in the game. At least I don't think I did. I did 2 playthroughs, and while neither of them found all 35 notes in one playthrough, I got different notes in each playthrough, so I got most of them. But I did find and listen to every cassette tape, VHS tape, and Lamone. He's there. Although, quick thing, I can't get him past this cutscene. So I'm putting out a bounty. I don't know, 20 bucks, whatever. The first person who can figure out how to get Lamone to the end of the game, record it and let me know. I want to do Lamone % so bad. But the lore reveals in this chapter were insane. This chapter confirms the identity of the prototype and how him and Poppy were created. It confirms the prototype's motivation, and it even nearly confirms the player identity. But before we even get to all of that, it also explains how the Doctor survived chapter 4. A lot of folks are understandably confused that half of chapter 4 was dedicated to killing the Doctor, and then in the next chapter he's not dead. But there are 2 hidden letters to Leith Pierre that sort of just directly explain how this is possible. The first one here is actually the Doctor explaining that he figured out the possible way to duplicate a mind, a way to infinitely test on somebody's brain if you can duplicate their mind. That way you won't have to worry about running out of test subjects. They decided it best to use that very same technology to copy his mind and keep a backup of it in case anything ever happened. So the Doctor we see in the basement is not the Doctor we killed in chapter 4. It's a copy of him that doesn't even know what the Hour of Joy is. So it'll be interesting to see how he interacts with the player. But speaking of the player, who is the player? Hi there, viewer. Did you know that code RITOS can get you 10% off your whole GAMERSUPPS order? Well, if you knew that, then you're wrong, because for this week only, it actually gets you 20% your entire order site-wide on GAMERSUPPS. So if you wanted to try it out, it's actually double the discount for this week only on GAMERSUPPS.gg. That is code RITOS for 20% off your whole order this week. So don't miss. Oh shit. It seems more and more likely, especially after chapter 5, that the player character is Richard Lovitz, the guy we've heard about or from in at least one audio tape or VHS tape or whatever in every single chapter. And the main reason is twofold. One, all of the other candidates are kind of doing their own thing. Rich was thought to be one of the main possibilities for the prototype, but now that we definitively know who that is, he can't go there. And 2, the main other possibility for the player was the 5th executive, and now we know exactly who that is. And it all comes down to this audio tape, where Eddie Ritterman and Leith Pierre are trying to figure out what to do about Rich, as even though he's just a warehouse manager, he's become sort of a people's champion. The employees really love and respect him, which means if he ever found out about what was going on and he told the employees, it would be a huge problem. But they can't just fire him because he would become a martyr. People would go on strike for him if they fired him. So the plan was instead to make him an executive, give him a massive promotion, a new car, huge money, basically make it seem like he sold his soul, like he sold out the employees in their best interest to enrich himself, giving up on fighting for his fellow workers in the chase of that bag. Because remember, as workers, collective action is our only bargaining chip. Anything seeking to drive a wedge between workers is simply the upper class trying to push the lower classes down. We are stronger together, there are more of us than there are them. And then once everybody hates Rich for seeming like a sellout, they can fire him without issue. And suddenly, this explains everything about the player character. That's why the player is the 5th executive. It's why the 5th executive's name was hidden from us. It's why there are 5 executive slides, but only 4 executive doors down in the playcare. It's why Dr. Harley Sawyer doesn't recognize this 5th executive. It's because it was all a sham. They never actually planned to have Rich be the 5th executive. They only gave him the promotion so they could fire him without issue. This is by far the best explanation for any player character we've gotten so far. We play as Rich, someone who's come to help and stop what's going on, save what children he can, and undo what he unwillingly helped to support. But that's still technically speculation. We didn't get a solid confirmation that the player is Rich. So let's move on to something we did get a direct confirmation for. The prototype has been one of the biggest mysteries of Poppy Playtime since we first saw its hand. Something that was maybe the first bigger body experiment, but not technically a bigger body. All we ever saw was this skeletal hand. But the timeline was always a bit confusing about him, and his source and who made him was always murky. Is it Elliot Ludwig? Is it Rich? Is it Leith Pierre? Is it the 5th executive? No one really knew. And we finally have the reveal of who the prototype is. And while I don't think it was the most common theory, this was a heavily speculated character to be the prototype. But I'll let the audio tape speak for itself.
Did you say something? Oliver? If you want to talk, I'm here. I don't pretend to know, but this is... No, Ollie.
It's never about me. Never about my place. It was for her. She's all you talk about.
Oh, my boy.
You don't get to call me that. Please, call me. I'm a test run on the prototype.
So, what's happening here? Because that seemed really direct. As we see in the files, the prototype was the predecessor to Poppy. He's experiment 1006, and Poppy is experiment 1007. And both of them were created with the specific mixture that Elliot Ludwig created that makes somebody never die. Now combine that with what we hear in this page in the last room in the game, what Leith Pierre wrote in his journal. Quote, "Where to even begin with this nightmare of a week? They were hiding it down in playcare, probably for several weeks, and somehow nobody noticed it. If it weren't for the accident with that Theodore child, I'm not sure we'd have discovered them at all, or Elliot's body. At any rate, Theodore's imaginary friend won't talk to anyone, but the girl, the one Elliot's notes called 1007, is a bit more cooperative. I feel like a moron just writing this part. She introduced herself as Poppy, not the doll, but the girl the dolls were made after, Poppy Ludwig. She remembered me, how we met. She had the same voice and everything. It was made only more unnerving by the fact that she seemed downright traumatized by the whole ordeal. It's impossible, isn't it? The girl's been gone a long time. There's more though. Things my investigator dug up from an office Elliot had tucked away. Most of it is trashed, but there are pieces. I still don't know what to make of it. All I know for sure is something big has been going on under our noses. Whatever it is, I think it might have gotten the old man killed." And a picture starts to form here. But to be clear, let me put it together. When Elliot Ludwig's daughter died, he began working on experimenting with rats and poppy flowers to try to undo death, to revive something that has died, make something unkillable, immortal. Or at least we know that by experiment 814, he was working with gel made out of poppies and rats. And he must have figured it out by experiment 1005, because by 1006, he felt confident enough to try this experiment on a child. Obviously, he couldn't risk his daughter's life. He would have come this far for nothing if his experiment didn't work. He needed to test it. Enter Oliver, an orphan from likely the playcare that he could adopt as his own for one sole purpose, an experiment before trying this new method of revival on his own daughter. And it did work. Now, we don't know exactly what he was. He may have just been this sentient, crawlable hand for all we know. But he was sentient, could speak, and had all of the memories of Oliver still. Once this worked, Elliot began working immediately on Poppy, creating Poppy, experiment 1007. And it was in this time that Ollie began to realize that he was only a test run for Elliot Ludwig. That was the point of all of this. And in his frustration in finding out that all he ever was a prototype for Elliot's manipulations and experiments, he lost it. And he killed Elliot Ludwig. And from then on, the prototype and Poppy hid in the playcare away from staff, until eventually the prototype's escape attempt failed. Theodore was just supposed to open a door for him, but ended up getting horribly electrocuted, and the prototype gave himself up to save him. That's how the prototype becomes initially captured by the scientists. The scientists didn't create the prototype or Poppy. They were both by Elliot. They were found by the scientists, and the experiments increased and ramped up from then on. That being said though, what's the prototype's goal? Like, what is the point of all this? Why is the prototype ruining the lives of everyone at this factory? What is the purpose? Well, that's spelled out for us pretty plainly in this audio tape. In essence, the prototype and Poppy are the only two successful experiments, the ones that cannot die. Everyone else eventually will. The prototype is terrified of a lonely infinity, being alive forever with no one but Poppy to share it with. And even then, Poppy doesn't seem to want to share it with him. So he needs to figure out immortality so that he's not alone for the rest of his life. Now, he's still very evil, because like, I get that fear causing you to do terrible things, but as we discussed, a negation formula was already like figured out by now. He could just die if he's so afraid of living forever, but he chooses not to. Instead, he causes mass toy genocide in order to hopefully figure out what his father already did. So what's next for the franchise? This game shook up the Poppy Playtime timeline immensely, and I would need a whole separate video to talk about the timeline of Poppy Playtime at this point. But the big question is, now that we know more than ever where we are, when we are, and what's happening next? The way I see it, there's really two possibilities for where the franchise goes on from here, and that's if they want to do just a chapter 6 to end out the series, or if they want to do chapter 6 and 7. Shit. If it's just chapter 6, then it seems like pretty straightforward what the ending is going to be. Rich and Giblet, with the assistance and knowledge from the Doctor, are going to finally take on the prototype and the modified new Poppy, being able to take them both down with the negation formula. I also have a feeling Chum is going to show up. We've established that one of the creatures who agreed to help the prototype is secretly on our side, and they seem fine by the end of the chapter. So I wouldn't doubt if that seed was planted, so later down the line, in a key moment, Chum can betray the prototype and help us, but we'll see. However, if there's a chapter 7, then I could see Poppy Playtime going full Portal 2 with this ending. In the process of taking down the prototype, the Doctor tells us that he can take it apart from the inside if we can get his consciousness into that toy somehow. And when we do so, it does work, but now Harley Sawyer controls the body of the prototype, ejects out the prototype's consciousness, and is the new big bad. And we have to work with Poppy and the consciousness of the prototype to take on Harley Sawyer, this monstrous, infinitely evil creature. And I could see it going either way, but the only way to find out for sure is to wait for it to come out. I mean, hell, I thought this was going to be the final chapter, and here we are. And that is my analysis and breakdown of Poppy Playtime Chapter 5. It is one of my favorite, if not the best chapter they've come up with so far. It's close with 3, but I think as a package for the franchise, it's probably the best one. Don't forget that tonight I'm going to be live on Twitch at twitch.tv/RightToastYT doing some speed run and trying to play around with the out of bounds of this chapter to see how far we can really push the game, and as an excuse to keep talking about Poppy Playtime. I'd love to see you there. We have a lot of fun. And if you don't really care about Poppy at all, well, you can watch this FNAF theory right here. For your fan art featured on the channel, make sure to share with #ToastArt. A huge thank you to the best channel members, the Dough Risers, and until next time, as always, stay toasty slices.